Welcome back to Sunday Square Off. Every 10 years, Arizona's electoral maps are redrawn. The legislative and congressional district you vote in this fall may be different from the district where you're going to vote in 4 years. Now, if you've been following the news, you know that redrawing maps is the one way a party in power holds on to power. And there's a power play going on right now at the state legislature. Republicans wanting to change the way the maps are redrawn. Now, voters approved the way Arizona maps are drawn almost 20 years ago. They'd have to approve any changes. There's already opposition to the changes Republicans want to make. Joining us this morning, Joel Edmond, Executive Director of the Arizona Advocacy Network. He opposes the Republican plan. Welcome to Square Off.
Thanks, Bram.
So the maps are redrawn after every census. Next one is in 2020. We'd see new maps in 2022. Arizona could get a 10th seat in Congress. Just take a step back. What is the voter-approved process for redrawing the maps?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's to redraw both our congressional seats and then the seats down at the state legislature, the districts that elect those seats. And in most states, you still have a process where the politicians themselves are drawing those maps. And that's where we can get, we hear this word gerrymandering a lot in other states, where one side's really trying to gain an advantage or politicians try to make it so they can't really lose their re-elections. Well, in Arizona, the voters looked around and said, we don't want that kind of process here. And so in 2000, we passed what's called the Independent Redistricting Commission. And the independent there is the key word. It's designed to separate the process from politics as much as you can. So it's a citizen panel of 5 members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and an independent that draw those maps. And there's some buffers put in there so that their selection process isn't direct from the party leaders at the state capitol, and that's a big problem with the proposal here.
And we'll get to that. Arizona's been viewed as a model nationwide in how we do the new map. So that would change under Republican Senate President Steve Yarborough's plan. How? What would change?
Yeah, so the main changes would be, one, expanding the commission to 9 members now, which that in itself is probably neither good nor bad. The biggest problem is that right now, to get on that commission, you have to go through sort of a filtering process to make sure you're qualified, make sure you'll be as impartial as possible. You apply to the Commission on Appellate Court Appointments, another sort of commission acronym out there, and they create pools of qualified candidates that are then chosen from. And so that's designed to create some amount, at least, of independence from the party leaders down at the Capitol. President Yarborough's plan would remove that process from now 8 of the new 9 members of this commission. So we'd have 4, partisan warriors on each side fighting over basically the one person's vote in the middle to redraw the maps. Which is kind of what we had back in 2010 through 2012. It was the one independent, the 5th person, the one independent, who was the decider. So this gets, the question then becomes what somebody said on this show a few weeks ago: how do you take the politics out of politics? Well, it's always going to be there, isn't it? No, that's right. I mean, there's always going to be some political element, and that's why there was a goal in 2000 to try to move away from politics. And the system we have isn't perfect. Maybe we could make it further removed from the politicians at the Capitol. Those are the sorts of changes that we'd be happy to be talking about. But what we're seeing instead are attempts to strip away the buffering processes that we do have. And it's being done in a completely partisan manner without any input from the sort of nonpartisan good government groups that are out there in the state, or just from regular voters.
And this did pass the Senate last week on a partisan 17-13 vote. So what exactly would you do to take this partisanship that you see in the process out of it?
Well, I think there are a few things that we could maybe look at doing. Maybe the Appellate Court Commission isn't the right body, or maybe there needs to be more than one layer of independence from politics. And those are things that we could look at doing. We could try to protect the Commission's funding, because it's been under attack by the legislature basically since it existed. And this last round, we went to the Supreme Court twice, and the Commission, by the way, won both times.
The U.S. Supreme Court. This was a titanic battle, an expensive battle.
That's right. And one of those lawsuits was brought by the legislature itself, trying to say the commission shouldn't even be able to draw our congressional maps, wasting our tax dollars, and the commission was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court.
But ultimately, as I said at the top, voters would have to approve this. The legislature can't do this on its own, so it would go to voters.
That's right, and hopefully that's the saving grace here, because the voters had a great idea in 2000 when they created this commission. And by the way, that was a really bipartisan and independent effort. Groups like the League of Women Voters and Democrats and Republicans at the time working together to try to take politics out of it, as much as we can. And so hopefully the voters would stand up for that process. And I think they would if this gets on the ballot.
All right. Joel Edmond of the Arizona Advocacy Network, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Bram.